So what is kinetic typography? Because in the name it sounds pretty complicated. Because whenever I first heard of it, or anytime I ever bring up that I do kinetic typography to anybody, they look at me kind of baffled because they don't, it sounds really complex, and I decided to look up the actual definition of what kinetic typography is because I felt like the name was a little too complicated for what it actually is. So for those of you that don't know what kinetic typography is, let's answer that question to start off this tutorial. Kinetic typography, the technical name for moving text, is an animation technique mixing motion and text to express ideas using video animation. So in simplest terms, literally, it's just moving text to sound. That's pretty much it. That's usually, I mean, I don't know if it specifies it's specifically moving the sound here, but like, that's usually what it's used in. Because most of the time you'll find, in this example I used for this video, it's used to music. But a lot of the time you'll actually see it being used in like TV shows, like fan-made redos of TV shows using the words that they say in those scenes, or in speeches you'll see it a lot, and you'll see this in commercials too. I saw one recently for an Allstate commercial. I believe is Allstate the one where they're like, you're in good hands or whatever. I saw like a really weird, like it was kind of like an ugly style of kinetic typography, but I saw it pretty recently, like yesterday, in an ad on YouTube. So it's used all over the place, and it's a very useful technique for anyone doing motion graphics. And today I decided to do my own tutorial talking about, this is going to be the basics of kinetic typography, basically a beginner's guide. So we're going to be going over very, very basic stuff and how I designed this video to cover. I have like a mental checklist of things that I want to cover in this video. And the first one is going to be talking about this example piece, because I made this video specifically for this, and I did a few things in here that I'm going to go over. So the first thing that I want to point out is tip number one, pretty much, listen to what you're editing. Because always remember that you have the advantage of being able to listen to what you're editing in advance. So when I heard this little song here, I'll let you take a listen to the beginning. So you listen, it's a repeated beat. It's the exact same note over and over again. It's like dun 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 dun, it's the same note. So I got this idea, I was like, well, if it's the same thing over and over again, what if I translated this idea into text? So I did that. It's exactly what I did. I did very abrupt cuts with different size texts to each beat. And basically I got this idea by listening to the song. And like I said, typography, this sort of typography isn't used specifically for music only, but in this example it will be being used for that. So first tip for you guys is listen to what you're editing. Just make sure if you have some sort of like sound in your audio, or you have some kind of beat or anything really. It's kind of hard to explain in a tutorial because there could be infinite amounts of like what's in your song or your audio piece or whatever. So just basically just listen, to what you're editing. There you go. All right. Now, like I said, I designed this thing specifically to cover little techniques of typography, and let's just say this. The whole point of this video is going to be taking everything that's done in this example, and we're going to be adding all of these things together, and we're just going to basically figure out exactly how I put this together and cover all these little basic techniques. So that's going to be our goal for this tutorial. All right, the first one is this zoom in of the text. And this may sound simple, but this is going to cover a bigger concept of something called null objects. And we'll cover that here in a little bit, but this actual text layer is not being scaled up traditionally. The actual layer of this text is not even being touched. We're going to talk about null objects and what they're used for in typography. And yeah, that's the first technique there. The second one is the zoom out and the text flying in from the right side of the screen into this other piece of text. And this actual layer is being animated, so we're going to cover that. Then after that, we have a very, very, very widely used X rotation bounce on 2D text. So you see the text is flat there, and it comes down, and it kind of like waggles into place a little bit. So we're going to cover how to do that, and then this text moves to the left a little bit more, and then we have the next piece of the word coming in on its Y rotation, so it does a Y rotation bounce. You can see it there. It comes in like that. And this is another very widely used form of presenting your text. So there you go. And then one that I find very appealing, I love it. It's this text coming up from behind a mask. And it might be because I'm just stupid or something, but I couldn't figure this out. Like, it took me a really long time to figure out how to do this. So if anybody else is having that problem, I would love to fix that for you. So I'm going to teach you how to do this text coming out from behind a mask. And it's most evident here. You can see the text is being cut off a little bit, and going by frame, we're going to see it kind of rise up from behind that mask. And I think it looks really clean, and it's also being combined with that zoom out. So there you go. Cool. And again, the text comes up from behind a mask, but the letters are spaced out pretty far, a little farther than they need to be, but this is corresponding with the movement of the screen, which, let's just say all of the screen movements are being done through null objects, and all the text movements are being done through their actual text layers, which I'll cover that more here in a second. So the reason why the letters are all spaced out like that, it's done with tracking, and I'm going to show you how to do that just a little bit later on. They're spaced out, and they are in sync with the rotation of the screen, because once it zooms out, the screen kind of like rotates to the -8-degree angle, and then zooms out a little bit, and then comes back down, and the text tracking kind of comes back in with that rotation. And I think that looks pretty cool. I'm going to teach you how to do that, and it's also just going to cover how to play around with your text and the screen movements at the same time, how to make them kind of work together. And one thing you're going to be noticing a lot is screen movements in my typography specifically, and I find it very helpful. Just knock something off my desk. Whoops. So one thing I want to point out is in this example, the singer, I thought this song was really good for this example because the singer splits up her words into syllables. And anytime you're working with an audio piece that has syllables in it, present your text by the syllables. If they, in this example, she says after, but she says af, and then ter, so I'll let you listen to the little piece here again. So she says like af, and then ter comes in after that. So I presented the text the syllable in the way she said it. So I presented it af first, and then there was also a beat once she said ter. So I zoomed the screen out and added a little bit of rotational wiggle and a little bit of exposure and a third-party plugin called Sapphire Shake, which I will show off in the end of this. It's not absolutely necessary, like you don't completely need it, but I'll show it off anyways. And then again, I do the syllable thing on laughter because she stretches that one out by syllables too, and you can listen to that again. So she says laugh and then ter, so I split that up into syllables. Just make sure you're basically, for any sort of motion graphic, make sure you always have something moving. That's going to be like the #1 tip for anything. Just make sure something is always moving on screen. You don't ever want, like, this is pretty static, but it's just a little intro piece, and it's going along with the intro to the song because of the, like I said, the recurring beat, which I think is fine. I could justify this, but if you animated your actual music video like this, I would be a little iffy on it, just because, I mean, if there were legitimate movement happening in this part of the song, and I animated it like that, it would just look really weird. But yeah, all right, that's all I really wanted to cover. So let's just get into to actually animating. So we're gonna make a new composition by doing Control-N on the keyboard, and I'm gonna take this background here, and we're gonna do a 7-second long composition. That sounds fine. And we're gonna work in 30 frames a second, and some people decide to work in 60 frames a second on typography. And I'm working on a project right now that's a typography project in 60 frames a second, but for most typography projects, I work in 30, just because I think it looks better. I mean, I don't know. That's just my personal preference. Most of my lyric videos, I'll make them in 30 frames a second, just because, I don't know. I just like how it looks. I think it looks a lot better. But you could work in 60 frames a second, or if you're insane and you think going above 60 frames a second does anything, and you want to work in like 3,000 frames a second, you can do that too. It's totally fine. So yeah, 30 frames a second, 7-second long composition, looks good. And we're just gonna take the ideas. We're not gonna completely recreate this thing. We're not gonna like use any audio. We're just gonna cover these basic techniques of what I did for this text. So the first one is this zoom in via a null object. And there's also one thing I want to point out is afterwards you can see a tiny subtle little zoom afterwards. So it does that fast zoom into place, but then it continues to zoom in a little bit more. And there's a technique I'm going to show you that I've never seen anyone do, but I find really, really, really helpful. It's actually using a null object and then parenting your first null object to another null object. And I'll show you that here. Oh, and one more thing. I actually used impact font, and I decided to do this because I just thought it looked good with the video. And I wanted to encourage you guys to use really strange fonts because impact font comes with like every computer. It's not like you don't go online and search for, you don't even search for this font. It comes on your computer. So it's not anything fancy. It's not a super crazy font. It's just a basic font. So, explore whatever, because typography is clearly it's very much so based off of what fonts you're using. It's a very big part of it. So just get creative and use crazy woody fonts that you don't think you'd ever use. Because I never thought I would use impact font in a typography project, but I did, and I think it turned out great. So yeah, another thing, just be crazy with your fonts. Get creative. All right, so the first one's going to be that zoom in. So let's just write out zoom, and let's pull up that impact font. Impact, there we go. Let's grab that color real quick from right here. And I should also mention that this song and the color scheme I got the song from are all in the description. So, because this isn't my own color scheme, I didn't make this myself. I was watching a remix of this really old, like 50s or 60s song I like that I heard on a show called Casual, and someone added like drums to it, and it was really good. So that will be in the description. All right. And one thing you'll notice in the example project is most of my typography projects, the first word I start will usually come into the center of the screen. And this is actually laid out a little bit to the left. But the reason why I did that is because I knew, editing in advance, thinking about what I was going to do, I put this to the left slightly so that whenever it would zoom back out, I could add the rest of the word and it would actually be in the center. So I'm going to put the zoom slightly to the left of the screen. And there we go, because we're going to be doing the zoom out or the zoom in first, and then we're going to do the zoom out and have another word come in and hit this word basically. So there we go. And one thing I should probably point out just to start this off is the align tool. This is going to be, if in typography, it's going to probably be like your best friend. Align is very, very helpful. Use it all the time. I find it one of the most helpful things because basically what it does is in your composition at all times, you will always have a line that's defining the center of your screen. And a line is going to center it to that line no matter what. So this is your vertical center, and this is your horizontal center. So if you want to immediately find your center, then this is what you're going to do. You're going to get a line, and you can grab that by going to Window and pressing a line and putting it somewhere in your workspace. I find it very helpful. And another thing for centering text, because I have this problem sometimes, and I've recently, well not recently, like over the last 2 years, I figured out the best ways of solving, like not knowing whenever the text is centered. It's going to be align and also pulling up your grid and guide options and going to title/action safe. And what this does is it creates this cool border around your thing, but most importantly is you have this plus here in the middle. And what that does is it's telling you this is the center, and it never changes. This is exactly where your center is. So for some reason you can't use align because if you have a pretty filled up project, you can, I'll probably end up blurring that out because my Facebook notifications are on. That's probably why I shouldn't have Chrome open during this entire thing. Because yeah, I don't want to expose anybody's personal information on the tutorial. What was I saying? Oh yeah, so this is the center of the composition, and it's always going to be that way. So for whatever reason, you can't use align because your workspace is pretty filled up, or you have keyframes on this or whatever. You can use this grid. So yeah, there you go. Cool. And I'm just going to center that, move it a little bit to the left, and now let's do our actual zoom in. So let's talk about null objects. What exactly are null objects? Well, null objects are invisible. They don't do anything on screen except for guide layers. So the best way I can explain a null object is saying like, you parent it. So what parenting is it's saying whatever this object, so it's parented to null9, it's saying whatever null9 does, I'm going to do. So this text layer is parented to null9, so whatever null9 does, zoom is going to do, right? Because it's parented. Now, we could get that animation, we could do zoom, and we could animate it like just straight from the layer. But what if we have multiple things on screen, you know? Like what if we have two zooms? We have zoom 1 and zoom 2, and we parent. This is already parented to null9, but like, so we have both the things on screen. So we would be in kind of an issue if we had to animate each of them individually and add like the exact keyframes and the exact movements for each layer. It would just get a little crazy and be a little unnecessary. So with null objects, you can move both of the text layers themselves, just with simply the null object. And that's exactly what this is used for. It's just used for moving objects, but not actually moving them. And I suggest whenever you have a null object, just get your layer parented to that one, and then turn off the visibility so you get this red box that appears. And turning off the visibility just gets rid of that red box, so you don't have to look at it, and it still works just as normal. So yeah. All right. Now let's get that zoom in going, and we're simply gonna do a scale. We're going to bring it to that position, and we're going to put a keyframe down on our null, and we're going to move it, say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 frames ahead, and then we're going to put this to 0. And then it just kind of scales in like that. And I think I want my text to be a little more in the center, or a little bigger. So yeah, that looks good. A little more to the left. Good. All right. So our text is being scaled in through linear keyframes. What are linear keyframes? They are these little diamonds. This is how you know your keyframes are linear keyframes. And what they do is that they are specifically designed to scale up equally. So no matter how far apart you put them, they will scale up in equal amounts. So if you take a look here at the scale and we go frame by frame, we see 2, 4, 6, 8, and then 100. And it's doing that because it's 5 frames apart in a 30 frames per second project, and it's going up equally. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Now, if we were to move it 10 frames apart from the start, it would go by 10. So 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, and so on. This can be used, and we're going to end up using these on a completely different null to get smoother like movements after our initial zoom. But to get way smoother movements, you're going to be using something called a graph editor and eased keyframes. So you highlight these keyframes and you press F9, and this does an easy ease, which is, in simplest terms, it's just smoothing. It's smoothing out your keyframes and making them a lot more easier to look at. So if you take a look at the scale, now it's not going to scale up individually, or it's not going to scale up equally. It's going to go 10.4 to 35.2 to 64.8, 89.6, and 100. And I usually use Motion instead of the graph editor. Motion is an After Effects script by Mount MoGraph, and I find it very helpful. So I would recommend picking that up, and I'm not going to use it in this tutorial because I know everybody doesn't have it. But I would suggest getting it if you're going to do typography or any sort of motion graphic. Let's talk about the graph editor. I'm not the best with it because I don't ever use it, but I know how it works. So you're just going to highlight your keyframes and press this little guy here. And now you have this loop, which is showing you, when I say loop, I mean this thing, this like hill, right? This is showing you what's going on in your actual keyframe. So when we ease it, it's starting kind of slow, going a little faster, and it peaks here. And this is the peak, and then it goes back down. So to get the smoothest movements, in my opinion, you're going to click on this handle here, and all you're going to do is just going to pull it in. So this is also being done through the speed graph, which you can find here, edit speed graph. And this is going to make it go, if you look at the graph here, you're going faster off the start. So it's going really fast, right? And then it slows into place. So we watch that back. It speeds up and then slows down. And it's very subtle, but use the graph editor if you don't have Motion. Make sure, I would recommend probably going to another tutorial to figure out more about the graph editor. But this is going to be your best friend in motion graphics. And usually for when I actually do a mess with the graph editor, these are the movements I do. I get my far right handle, pull it in, speed it up, and slow it down. That's all I do. All right, cool. So now we have this movement. And it's not being done through linear keyframes anymore. This is being done through ease keyframes. And now, let's talk about how in the example, it zooms in, and then it kind of like very subtly. You can see it zooms in a little more afterwards. And we could easily do this through this null object. Like we could move a few frames in and put this up to like 100.5 or 105, and it continues to zoom in afterwards. But I find it way easier to just simply create a new null object. And in this tutorial, I'm going to be doing a keyboard shortcut to pull up null objects. And that keyboard shortcut is going to be Control, Alt, Shift, and Y. And that's going to create a new null object. And if you're working in After Effects, I would recommend learning all of the keyboard shortcuts because they're very helpful. All right, so this null object, let's talk about these. This is going to be specifically our ease null. And what that means is that all of our eased keyframes are going to go on this ease null. And then we're going to parent our ease null to this new null. And the question is, what are we going to do on this one that's so significantly different and important compared to this one? Well, we're going to be specifically working on this one in linear keyframes so that we can get equal amounts of scale or position movements so that we don't have to do that in this one. It's just a lot more organized in my opinion, and I think it's a lot more helpful. I use this all the time, and I've never seen anyone else do this technique before, so if you know like a better way to do this or you think this is stupid, most of what I do is self-taught. Like every editing program I've ever learned has been self-taught, so I might be a little weird in my editing, but this is what I do. I find it helpful. I think it's just way more organized than doing it all in one null. So yeah, to break this down, the reason why this works is that you have your zoom layer, or if we had more text layers, all of them would be parented to this ease null. And so this ease null is controlling everything that's happening to that text. So if you parent this ease null to the new null object, that is going to carry over to this next null object. So we could just simply scale this up to like 102. And now we have the text going in. It's being scaled in really quickly from our ease null. And then on our linear null, autosave. Got to make sure we're autosaving that project. Linear null. So we're going to rename these so we know exactly what's happening, right? So ease null and linear null. We have that zoom in, and it continues to zoom in a little bit. And there we go. Cool. Perfect. All right. So this little intro bit for this part of the example is just showing off ease nulls, linear nulls, and how to zoom in your text through a null object. That's great. All right, on to the next one. Now we're going to do the zoom out and animating our text layer to kind of come in from the right side of the screen and bounce into this text. So let's get that started now. So another thing about this linear null is that you can use this as an automatic marker. So I know when I'm looking at this linear null, I know once this movement ends, so once we get to this end keyframe, I know that's the end of the movement. So I can place a keyframe down on my ease null. And then I'm like, okay, well, I know exactly when I come back, if I'm working back here and I come back, I'm like, oh, all right, so this is where the linear null ends here. So I got to start working from this position, if that makes sense. So now we're going to zoom out using our ease null, and we're going to probably go to like 40%. Let's see. Yeah, I'd say like 40, like around 40. And then we'll pull open that speed graph and grab this handle and just pull that guy back so we get smoother movements. Hold on. Make sure that's doing right. Yeah. That should be fun. All right. Here we go. Yeah. Okay. So now here's what I usually do is I don't even make new text layers unless I'm like working in a new font or something. So we're just all in this project, we're working simply in one font. So another tip that I'm going to say is do not if you don't have to make a new text layer, then don't, because you have to go through the hassle of scaling it to the correct proportion and then parenting it to your first null object. And it's just a mess, right? Like I just don't find it very helpful. So all you can do is just take your whatever text layer, since this is going to be in the correct scale that we want it to be in already, and it's already parented to the ease null, and it's just perfect. We don't need to do anything else with this. We just duplicate it. We do Control D on that text layer to duplicate it, and then it's perfect. Now we're gonna do zoom out, right? So we do zoom out. Looks good. And we place that like right here, so it looks like one sentence. And now we can pull open that title action safe to make sure this is centered, which it's not. So Pressing Shift, we can highlight both of these and then press down on it and hold Shift to move it across an axis. And we will find the center of it, which is about... it's really hard to tell. It's sometimes kind of hard to tell. I think it's right about there. Like, I think the plus would have to be kind of like on that M. Kind of like there, I guess. Yeah, I think that's going to look the most correct. So if we zoom out, we can kind of see. Yeah, it looks like it's a little more to the left than it needs to be, but that's okay. Whatever. If you're working in an actual, project, make sure this is perfectly centered. And we could I think we could use a line too to do this. If we center it aligned to the middle of the composition. You see, sometimes it does that. So, yeah, I mean, we can move it to the horizontal center, or the vertical center, but we can't move it to the horizontal. That's why sometimes I said, like, if for some reason you can't use a line, then you can always use that little grid. So I think that looks perfect. Like, it looks close to perfect, at least. So let's do that position movement. And simply, all we're going to do is press this, press the out, because that's when we're going to be animating to come in. And we're going to keyframe the position, and then we're going to move this to be in line with this zoom out, so it happens all at the same time. And then we're going to move it all the way over to the right, just to where it's off screen. And I want to mention that technically the text is off screen at this point. So like here is where it becomes off screen. And we'll move it a little bit past that point. But if you were to animate back here, technically being off screen would be all the way over there, which would be a little bit too much. So just keep that in mind, that whenever you're doing a zoom out like this and you're making something specifically position come in, you can just move your position to where it's off screen in relativity to wherever your null is scaled into, if that makes any sense. So yeah, now let's ease these keyframes, pull open that graph editor, and take that, pull that in, get that smooth little movement, and now we have a zoom out and the text coming in. Easy peasy. Super easy, look at that. Super good. Nice. All right, next piece is this little X rotation bounce. And I also want to mention that there's obviously some more flair going on here. Like, you see there's clearly motion blur ticked on, and then when it zooms out, there's a little bit of an exposure change, and there's also a rotation added with a little wiggle to it. And I will show you how to do that at the end, because we don't really need to do that right now. I'll show you the adjustment layers I use to get that exposure and screen shake, because if you look, you can see it moves a little bit, like out of place, and then it zooms out, and then the screen shakes a little bit. It's very subtle, and I'll show you exactly how we do that in a little bit. But for now, don't worry about that. All right, so then we move to the left a little bit, and we have a bigger text that comes in off the X rotation and does a bounce. And for that bounce, we're going to use a very, very simple expression that you don't need to do anything to. I will put it in a paste bin in the description, because YouTube doesn't like to let me paste expressions into the comments or anywhere. Yeah, you like to just love to interrupt my tutorials, don't you? Now he probably won't leave. That's my cat. His name's Goldman. He probably won't leave, ever, like, for this entire tutorial. He wants to learn how to edit typography. What a guy. What a guy. Alright, so I'll explain how to use this expression properly. Like, all you're going to be animating, or all you're going to be changing, is the amplitude and frequency. If you want to, you can change the decay, but I don't ever do that, because it's not very, I don't ever really mess with that. I don't even really know what it does. I think decay just means how quickly it's going to end. I'm pretty sure that's what it means. I don't ever mess with it, so I don't even know what it means. I just leave it at 4.0. Alright, so we're going to do a position movement. Oh, and also, on the linear null, let's keep that zoom out going down to like 99. So it zooms out, and then out of the linear null, it continues to zoom out a little bit more. I don't even know, like, my cat's like purring on my desk right now, so hopefully that's not picking up on the microphone. So on the ease null, let's put a position keyframe down, and then move that over to the left, and let's count like 6 frames or so. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And then we move that over to the left. I think that looks fine there. And then, again, like always, press F9 while highlighting your keyframes. Keep them highlighted. Grab that, graph editor, pull that in, and then you get that smooth, fast to slow movement. Looks great. Alright, and now we're going to, again, just duplicate that text layer. Probably just duplicate the zoom because it doesn't have any keyframes added to it, so it's nice and easy for us to animate. And then we're just gonna, let's make this text say huge, because we're gonna make it pretty big compared to the rest of the text. There we go. And we'll just press S on our keyboard with that active to scale that up. I really hope my cat's not picking up on the audio. That would be unfortunate. I wonder what he wants. What do you want? Huh? You're interrupting my tutorial. He's also like nudging my mouse, so it's getting really, it's kind of like it's like I'm working through his efforts to try to stop this tutorial right now. Alright, and we have our position movements there. And now the text. So how do we get it to come off of the x-axis? Because if you pull up the rotation right now, there's no option to actually animate the x, y, and z rotation. All you have to do for that is you see this little cube right here. And if you don't have that available, it's because you have this toggle switches and mode thing set to this area where you have your track mats and your modes. So just click that, and then I'll bring up this, and then you turn on the cube to make it 3D. And now you have these little handles that come up, and I find very helpful because instead of having to hold shift and move text, you can actually just move along axes with this. So I find that helpful. And now, if you press R on the text, we have these X rotations, Y rotation, and Z rotations. And now we can actually just animate these to come in like they did from the example. So all we're going to do is have it on a negative 90 degree, and then in sync with that position movement, it's going to kind of fly down and flop into place, and for that the bounce we will add an expression. So let's just animate X rotation from negative 90 degrees, so it's like flat like that, and then over time we will have it come back down to 0. And the thing about this expression is, oh, I closed it. Let me pull that up, or yeah, I did close it. I'm an idiot. There it is. The thing about this expression is that it doesn't work very well with eased keyframes, so I just recommend if you're not using motion, then just don't ease your keyframes while using this expression. You can use linear keyframes, it really won't make much of a difference. And the bounce is also determined off of velocity of the keyframes, so the closer you put them into each other, the bigger the bounce is going to happen. And if you want to mess with that, you can always mess with the expression yourself. So to get that expression going, you just get the stopwatch and hold down Alt and click on it, and then this little line will come up, and then just go to the paste bin I have in the description, copy down this expression, and paste that in, and that will add some nice pizzazz to the text and give it that cool bounce. And I want to make this position movement happen faster, so let's just bring that in, probably just 1 frame. So there you go. And I don't like how much it bounces, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the amplitude in the expression and just turn that down to like 0.3. And then on the frequency, I will turn that down to 1 so that it bounces 1 time. So comes down, bounces 1 time into place very subtly. I think bounces are best used in if I had a face cam, this would be like the funniest face cam ever, because you just see me fighting my cat. So I think bounces are used best in moderation, so just don't go overboard with it. Don't make it absolutely crazy. Like if you turn, I don't know what would even happen if I did this. If I turn the amplitude up to like 30 or 300, oh my god, Jesus Christ. Whoa, man. Whoa. That is insane. I've never done that before. It's actually really funny. It's like having a seizure. See, don't do your text like that. If you have like a client and you show him this, he's gonna be like, "What's wrong with you, dude? Did you make this?" Okay, so don't go crazy overboard with it. Just do a nice little subtle bounce. So it just kind of wiggles into place. It doesn't look too crazy, and it's not too extravagant either, but it's very subtle and very cute. I like it. So that looks good. And then now we're going to do that nice little Y rotation on the second syllable. So here we go. And I'll show you to do that. We'll do another position movement. And on the linear null, we'll actually open up our position. And wherever this actual position movement ends, we will start it. And we'll move ahead to like 2 seconds. No, less than that. It's like 25 frames. Here 1 second and 20, yeah, okay, so like there, move it to like, well, actually, no, we're actually just animating the, okay. So we're not going to move it very far. Let's go to like 9, 9, 5. Yeah, so it zooms in, continues to zoom a little, or slides in, and then continues to slide a little bit. And I think that looks good. And then we'll do another position movement once this linear keyframe ends. Just, like I said, using this as a sort of a marker, so you know whenever you're supposed to do your movement. So we move another 5 frames, and then move it to like there, and that looks good. In the example, it doesn't do it that exactly. It actually moves this off of the screen, but we're not going to do that for this one. We're just going to move it to like there, and then pull open that in the graph editor, and oh, that's already nice and tight for us. Cool. Boom. Slides in. I like that. Looks good. And then add a linear keyframe there, and we'll just bring this to like there. Cool. Probably less than that. Like there. Cool. And let's actually animate the next word, which is going to be text. So it's going to say zoom out huge text. Sounds like it was written by a toddler. Zoom out huge text. Sounds good. And we're just going to duplicate the huge layer because it's already in the correct scale that we need it to be. And it's already 3D and it already has that expression applied to it. So it would just make sense to just duplicate that layer and not go through the hassle of making a new one. So we'll type out text using those handles that I find pretty nifty. We will put that there, and we're actually going to have to zoom this or slide this over a little more so that it has room. There we go. And the cool thing, this is exactly why I do this on the linear null. So like, if I were to actually animate this extra little after slide, so it kind of like looks like there's kind of velocity to the movement of the screen, and if I were to do it on this null, I would have to go through and change everything in order to make sure that it's still consistent, right? Like it would be a lot more of a hassle. So if you just do it on 2 different null objects, it just makes life so much easier, man. It just makes life so much easier. So I suggest this a lot. All right, so now we have text, and we're gonna pull open the rotation, and let's just set this there, put a keyframe down on Y rotation, and bring this into positive 90 degrees. So it goes like that, and it slides into place like that. My cat won't stop getting on my desk and hitting my screen. He's being such a jerk today. And like I said, we already have the expression applied to the X rotation. So let's just copy that and paste that on to the Y rotation. And we just completely get rid of this because we don't need that. The X rotation, we don't even need that. And using Alt open bracket, I'm going to trim the this text layer to my time indicator. So that looks good. And hopefully, I believe I'll probably need to turn down the text a little bit. The bounce, yeah, I'll turn this down from 0.5. I think it was at 0.3 actually. I'll just turn the frequency down to like 0.7. Not /7, 0.7, and we keep the amplitude how it is because I do like how much, like the amount it bounces, but I don't like how long it bounces for. So there you go. It just does that nice little with the movement. You know, it comes in. And that's the thing you should probably take into account here is that all of the screen movements are influencing the text movements. So basically, anytime. So what we're doing, anytime a text movement happens. Oh, I also need to trim this to be there. So there you go. Just so it's not visible throughout the entire thing. But if you look, clearly each screen movement and the screen movements are all being done through the nulls are influencing each text movement. So we have the zoom, and then once the null zooms out, we have the text coming in from the side, and then once it moves to the left, the text comes in from that x-axis rotation, and once it moves again to the left, we have it on the Y rotation. So each screen movement is influencing text movement. So just keep that in mind when you're making typography. Like, you can get super creative with it. And one of the bigger ones that we'll cover is that the tracking movement with the rotation. How the screen rotation influences the text coming back together like that. That's a big thing there that will play into that. So now we have that all done, and just on our linear null, I believe we already moved it. Yeah, so we did. Cool, and now we know where to start because of that linear null. It's a little marker. Cool, And the next thing that happens is a zoom out and the text coming up from behind the mask. And hopefully this can help you guys out because I wanted to know how to do this for a very long time. And we're actually going to run into an issue here with scaling because I want it to scale out like in this video here. We have it move from the true center to the left and to the left again. And then it scales out from the center. And the reason why that's kind of intriguing is because it's like, if I were to do that on mine, it wouldn't scale out from the center. It would scale out to the left because we messed with the position of our ease null, right? Like we messed with it, so it's not our ease null anymore. So to fix this, what we're going to do is create a brand new ease null. And we're going to be using something called shying, which is basically going to get rid of a layer completely, but keep it in your timeline, but just to where you can't see it. So let's take a look at that. So like I said, if you take a look at this, there's a pretty big difference in the scale out. So it scales out to the center and then text comes up from behind a mask. But if we were to do that, it would scale out to the left a little bit. And like I said, that's because of the position we moved it from. So we're just going to do Control-Shift-Y to make a new null object. In our most recent null, we're going to parent to this one so that it does scale out from the center. Because it's kind of hard to explain because it gets kind of confusing. It's like I don't know what the correct word would be. It's like an epidemic of like null objects. So you have all your text parented to this ease null, and this ease null is parented to that linear null, and then all the movements from ease null are going to go into a linear null, and all of the text layers are parented to the ease null. So this linear null controls that ease null, which all the texts are parented to, and then you parent linear null to null 11, and it's just the exact same thing's going to happen for this one. Now all the text movement is going to be influenced over to this guy, and we're just going to name this one ease null again, and I'll probably make it ease null 2 so that we know the difference between this ease null and that one. So like I mentioned, there's something called shying, and shying is just very simple. It's taking away a layer but not truly taking it away. So this little button here is called your shy button. And if you click it, I don't know if there's an actual name for it, but it's just how to shy a layer. You click it and you get this little like 2-line thing going on from this logo to this one. And then up here you have hides all layers for which the shy switch. So that's your shy switch, not shy button. Shy switch. You press that and that ease null completely goes away. But if you press it again, it comes back. And it's always going to be there in the timeline, but it's just going to be to the point where you can't see it anymore. So it's not taking up any space in your timeline. So that's what that's used for. And you can also do that, like if you just wanted to completely forget about all of these text layers here, you can just shy those too. Like, why do you even need those? We'll probably just keep those shied because we don't even need them. Yeah. Oh, I'll actually keep one not shied so that we can duplicate that layer later. So we'll keep that one unshied. And there we go. So all those layers are going away, but they're still there in our timeline. And now we can focus on this new ease null. And yeah, let's just turn off visibility on that. Set a keyframe on the scale, and let's zoom out to like here, and then zoom pretty far out because we're gonna have a pretty big text compared to this one. So we want to make sure that this text appears small compared to this one because we're gonna have a pretty big text coming in, like I said. And so just make sure this one looks sort of small. We'll probably put this down to like 35. And just to get that contrast going in, because when you're working with Kinetic Typography, I like to make some words bigger than other ones to exaggerate importance, to make when text is bigger, it looks more important than the other text, and it will draw the viewer's eye to that piece of text. So I just like to play with that a lot, and like always, highlight F9, easy ease. You guys know this already. You guys are already pros at this. You guys already know what you're doing. You don't even need to watch this tutorial anymore. You already know what you're doing, right? So we get that smooth movement. We'll probably want that to come in a little quicker. So there you go. We have that nice speed to slow. There we go. And well, maybe we'll actually make this farther apart because we want the text to come in kind of slow. So there you go. It looks smooth. Now, how do we get that text to come up from behind the mask? So let's just duplicate this text here, and we will make this one will be called mask. Just masked. I had donuts earlier, so I'm a fatty, and I keep, like, my chest hurts from eating. So we're, and I'm also rotating this on its Y rotation. I'll do it to, like, 2. If you take a look here, this text is kind of, it's kind of rotated a little bit, probably, like, close to 2 degrees. on the Y rotation, so it just looks kind of cool. And we're going to do that to the same to this one. And we're just going to scale this up to where it's a lot bigger than the rest. Comes in like probably bigger than that to like there. Yeah, it looks cool. Right there. Cool. But we are going to animate position. But if we just pull up in position on this text and we move it down, and we also have a mask, and to make a new mask on a text layer, just do Control, Shift, and N to make that happen. And you can also right-click on it, go to Mask, and do New Mask. But I like shortcuts. But if you move your position, the mask moves with it. So we need to animate our position on the text a little differently. So just press this arrow here, and that's going to pull open all this crap, but you just want to focus on this here, on Animate. Now press that, and then Position will come up right there. Animate that, and now we can actually put our text behind the mask, so it will come up, we'll animate it. So we just put a keyframe down and move that all the way over here. Is that lined up? So one frame ahead, there we go. And then we will put it under the mask. So kind of rises. Right, put that to like, I think it truly, I usually see when I'm doing this that 150 on the Y is true. It's like that's usually where the text is fully behind a mask. So yeah, there we go. We have the zoom out and the text coming out from behind the mask. And you can, this is a really good example to see what a big difference that easing does. So take a look at the zoom out of the screen and how the text comes in. Like, look at how weird that looks, right? Like the text, the screen movement looks cool. And it's just very nice and smooth, but the text kind of just abruptly stops and it just looks like garbage. So that's just kind of goes to show how much easing can do for you. You have correctly eased keyframes and your entire project will look great in no time. So highlight, keyframes, press this, drag it in, get that nice look. And now we watch that again. It's very, very smooth. Just looks like it looks like you spent a little bit of time on this, making it look all smooth and stuff, but literally it took like a minute. Not even long at all. So that's it. That's the text coming up from behind the mask. I don't know why that took me so long to figure out, but it did. And now using our linear null, we'll just place a keyframe down here and then move to like here and bring this out to like 95, 96. Yeah, so it zooms out off of the linear null, continues to zoom out a little bit. There you go. And then I'll probably move that in a little bit closer so we have room to work with. And now the next thing that we're doing is this. The screen kind of rotates to on a -8 degree, and then like pretty quickly it zooms out smoothly too. It zooms out, goes to a -8 degree angle, and then slowly comes back into place. And this is just focusing on the screen. Like, don't look at the text right now. Just look at the screen. So the screen zooms out, and like I said, goes on that degree, and then comes down. And it's eased into place like that. And now focusing on the text, you can see how this screen position movement influences the way the text comes together. So just looking at that, it's very, very fluid. It's all in sync. You can see that there. That was specifically done to, the screen movement was done to play with this text. So yeah, and there's also, like I said in the beginning, tracking on this text that I'll show you how to do. And let's get into that. So on our new ease null, we will place a keyframe down and go a little bit in, like there. And then go to 15, I'd say. Does that look fair? Yeah, looks good. Make sure that is not correctly done. There you go. So I want it to be pretty spaced out, like pretty far apart on this position, on the scale movement. Yeah. And we're also, on the ease null, we can just pull open the rotation as well. And to pull open two different parameters at the same time, when you're doing your shortcuts, so S for scale, R for rotation, T for opacity, A for anchor point, and you can do M for masks, which there's no masks available. I feel like I missed one. Oh yeah, P for position. So I want to open up scale and rotation at the same time. So to do that, I hold down, or say there's nothing selected, you do S and then hold down Shift and press R. And then you'll be able to pull open two different parameters at the same time. So cool thing going on there. So synced with this scale, we're going to have the rotation go, like I said, to -8. So it will ease these just to make sure we get that final look. I'll just pull open that. Pull that in. There you go. And now we have it going like that. And I think I want this to kind of start before the text even zooms out. So it kind of like, yeah, it looks a lot smoother. So like barely stuttered. There you go. So it looks more fluid that way. So there you go. And then we will have it slowly come back down to 0. And we're going to be doing something called ease out, which is going to make it start. It's going to get faster and then get slower. So if you take a look at what this looks like in the graph editor, you can see a little hump here, a little hill. So thinking about this in a keyframe, it's going to start slow and then get faster. And you can, if you take a look, it says 14.46 degrees per second. So you're just going higher and higher and higher, and then it hits its peak here, and then it gets slow. It gets slower. So that's what you have going on there, and you can mess with this a little more to get it to kind of get slower faster. And this is going to work in our favor a little bit later once we actually animate the tracking of the text. So we'll have this already made so that we know how fast the tracking of our text needs to come back into place. So let's just duplicate. Actually, let's just make a new text layer for this one because we don't need it to be 3D, and we can make it the correct scale pretty easily. So this one will be a track. This one, yeah, I think just the word track would look good, or maybe tracks, so that we have enough space to enough letters to work with, and we will put that. Oh, and that's another thing, because our ease null 1 is shied. Hope maybe it'll come up on here. All right, there it is. So we can just parent it to the ease null without even unshying it. I didn't even think about doing that because I usually use the pick whip for stuff. But you can just press that, and if you have shied layers, like I said, they'll still come up. They'll still be there. So there's our ease null. Now it's parented to that. Oh, we actually do need to make this 3D. So I goofed because if you take a look, it's very subtle. But this is actually on an x-axis or y-axis turn to negative. And since it's big, it's going to get like really kind of distorted. So I think it's on like -1. So we scale that up to make it a lot bigger than it is right now because we want the contrast of the text to be pretty evident. So there we go. I think a little bigger. There we go. So yeah, -1 works fine. Take a look at that. I believe this is actually rotated weird. Yeah, it is. Okay. So the Z rotation was messing with me there. So there we go. Now it goes in properly like that. So we have our screen movement here, and we want it to come up from behind the mask. So what we can do is we can just literally copy what we did on this here. So just make a new mask on your tracks text and just do Control-Shift-N to make that new mask happen. And, well, hold on. First, let's actually animate our tracking because we need our mask to come in a little later. Yeah. All right. So just to animate tracking, just do the exact same thing you did for position and open up tracking. And what is tracking? Tracking is how far apart your text is from each character. So your tracking amount, you pull that up, and now all of these letters are going to come apart like that. I think I actually want it to just be tracks because in the example, the A stays static. Yeah, okay. So the A stays static in the animation. The reason for that is because we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 characters, and it's an uneven amount. So it's not going to move each character individually because one needs to be, like you see, we do tracks. All of them will move together like that because it's an even amount. But if we do tracks, one of them, well, I guess maybe because I assume that's how it was done, but maybe it's just the lower amount because I don't believe any of them are staying static there. So I guess it doesn't have to do with being even because I assume that's how it was done. I guess if you have like a smaller word, one of them becomes static. No, I guess it's just 5 characters is the one it wants to set with. That's really weird how it only does 5 characters and then one of the letters becomes static. Huh. Because like, look, the A doesn't move, but all the other ones do, and I really liked that effect. So I guess, I don't know, make 5 characters and your text will stay, like the middle letter will stay centered like that. I don't know, that's weird. I thought that's how it was determined, but I guess not. You learn something new every day. There you go. So we have our track there, and the tracking is set to like 55. And let's just animate this to come in quickly, back down to like 30, just to correspond with this rotation, because we look at it, the text, the rotation kind of comes in like that pretty quickly to a -8 degree. So we're going to do the exact same thing with this tracking and lower it down to like 30 from 55. And then it's going to come together pretty quickly, like that. Something like there, to there. Yeah, I think that's good. So it kind of comes in like that. And then slowly over time, we will have it go back down to 0. And we will ease this keyframe out so it does that same hill thing again as we saw in the here. So we have the hill, and we will just pull that in there. Looks good. So that's our hill. We can make this go slower or whatever, but I think it looks fine there. And let's just take a look at how that is when we bring it over there. So let's just using Alt and open bracket, we'll put that down there and scale this, bring that to there. So the tracking comes in. We probably want that to happen quicker. Maybe yeah, so it's probably gonna have to happen beforehand, because we also need to do count that we're gonna be putting it up from behind a mask. So maybe we should just do that first. So let's start from the beginning of this and create a new mask, Control-Shift-N. And then, like I said, we just literally copy the masked parameters and just copy those and put them onto our position. I don't believe I made it yet. Did I? Nope, I don't think so. So pull open position. There we go. And then just paste that in there. And then we already have our text behind a mask. And as you can see, a few letters are kind of coming up. So you can just bring that down there. And that's just because they're a bigger scale. One of them is poking out a little bit there. So there we go. It comes up from behind the mask. And let's just mess around with this and get it to look how we want it to. Oh, okay, I see. All right. I see what we're doing. Okay. What's happening is we need this to be scaled out, or this to happen slower. So I want it to come in like that. Yeah, okay, I see. I think what we want to do is we want this to kind of be more noticeable. So let's bring this up. We're to like 20. So it kind of comes in quicker like that. It's like a more noticeable change. So yeah, as you can see, this needs to be a little quicker, a tiny bit quicker. Yeah, that looks in sync, right? So take a look at it. Once the rotation comes back down, the text is about there, like about, it's in sync with that same movement. It's a lot of little messing around with it and seeing what looks good, so that needs to happen a little longer. There you go. All right, so have our text coming up from behind a mask. The tracking goes pretty quickly into place. Pretty subtle movement, I like it. And then the screen rotation going back down brings that text together like that. And that's exactly what we did in this one here. And the text was a little farther spaced apart. And it looks a little smoother, but that's because I was using motion. And this is not like an advertisement or anything, but you're gonna get way smoother and way better animations using motion. Like, using the graph editor is great, but using motion is so much better, and it's so much faster too. It's just the most efficient and like best way to get effects. Like, the expression I showed you, if you have motion, you can just press excite and it does it for you. You don't even need to add the expression. It's not like an advertisement or anything, but I'm just saying you get way better results if you use motion. But this still looks fine. It doesn't look bad. So you have the text. So what have we made so far? Let's tick on motion blur and let's unshy our layers. Just take a look at all of them and pressing all of these here. Put on motion blur. Let's tick that on. Do a RAM preview and see everything that we've done in this however long this tutorial was. Because we're pretty much done at this point. I'm going to show you how to do after this a very quick way to add some extra flair and some more, a little bit more movement to your text. And just this is going to kind of go along with whatever happening in your audio. So hold on. So as you can see, looks pretty cool. We have our text zooming in off of the null, and then zooming out, and then our text flying in from the right side of the screen. And then we have a movement to the left, our text coming off of the X rotation, doing a little bounce, another left turn, and then the text flying off of its Y axis, and then coming into place. And then we have that coming up, the mask, find the mask with a zoom out using, again, the null object, and each little movement happening after the initial zoom or position movement is happening via that linear null. And we have the there, and then the zoom out, and then again the rotation, another zoom out, and then going back into place, the tracking all coming together like that. Looking very sweet and nice, all in sync with that. And one thing that we can do is to add, just so it doesn't look so abrupt, that's the one thing I noticed, is that whenever the ease null ended, it looked pretty, like, I don't know, it just didn't look right. So all we do is on our linear null, go all the way to the end of our thing and move this down to like 90. So we get a noticeable zoom out. Signifying that it's over, the tutorial is over. So let's take a look at that one more time and see what difference the linear null actually added to our animation. Because if you guys remember what it looked like before, there was really nothing happened after the text zoomed out. It was just kind of static and looked kind of gross. So here we go, all stuff happening. There you go, look at that. You got a little extra zoom happening there. And it's a very smooth animation. We put it together in like probably close to an hour. Didn't take very long, and that was with me explaining it. So if you're doing this on your own time and making all this stuff happen, it won't take very long at all. So let's talk about, now this is just a little bit of extra credit. So the main tutorial is all right here. It's already done, so I love you. Thanks for watching. If you want to participate for extra credit, then this is what this is about. So now you have this thing going on here, and I use this all the time in typography projects. It's a screen shake and rotation bounce. So the rotation is being done through the null object. So as you can see, once it zooms out, it goes from 0 to 4. Let's go frame by frame. 0 degrees there, so there's no rotation, and then it goes to 4 right there. That's when it hits its peak, and it goes back down to 0, and then it does a little bit of a bounce right there. So as you can see, it kind of wobbles. And on top of that, there is a Sapphire plugin. That's third party, so if you don't have this, I don't expect everyone to have this. I would suggest picking it up. I have all the Sapphire plugins right here. They're all really helpful. There's one called Sapphire Shake that you can apply to an adjustment layer and set the amplitude on, which I'll show you here in a second. And it shakes the screen a little bit, so if you take a look at AF, from here, in this frame, you can see it's being changed. The position of it's being changed. And watching it, the screen does a little bit of a shake once that happens. Let's get past this intro bit. So on the beat, it kind of shakes, and there's also a bit of exposure added that's keyframed down. So let's go into our actual composition here, and we have it right here. So it's probably gonna take a second to load that because I haven't opened it yet in a little while. Just let animation or let After Effects do its thing. Load up. All right. So this is our adjustment layer. We have S_shake, which is that shake, the Sapphire Shake, and then we have our exposure. So I'm just going to bring that over to this composition that we had here for the example. Just turn off motion blur for faster previews. And on the zoom out, I'm just going to paste that for the thing. And the reason why it does this is it has to do with the Sapphire Shake. It's wrap X and wrap Y are reflect, so you just turn those off, and that completely gets rid of the reflecting of the text across the X and Y axis, and that's cool. So it does that little shake, and I think it's going to be a lot more noticeable here. So if you take a look, the shake is very noticeable. So you take a look at that, that's what it looks like with it on. So just watch how it kind of goes out of place a little bit, and then we turn it off, and what does it look like with it off? Nothing's happening, right? So you guys can see that's happening there, and there's also the exposure change, which is happening. Which is kind of subtle, actually. I don't know, maybe it's not even happening. It's really yeah, it is happening. It's kind of hard to see, so we'll just turn that up so it's more noticeable. 0.3. There we go. All right. Why do I feel like that's not happening? I guess it is. I don't know. Maybe I'm like blind. I feel like the exposure's not like. Let's see. I can test it like this. Yeah, it's there. It's just very, very subtle for some reason. Interesting. Maybe, does it have to be on top of everything? Is like something covering it? Nope. Okay, well, the exposure is definitely there. It's just being weird. So we have that Sapphire Shake. Let's also talk about the rotation, the little rotation wobble. So we're doing that through our first ease null because that's just going to work out better for us. So like I said, you're going to be animating. We're going to do this through linear keyframes because, like I said, this ease or this bounce expression doesn't like to work very well with eased keyframes. So we're going to go 3 frames in and change this to 4 degrees, and then go back to by 4 frames, and then set this to 0. And grabbing this expression, we will alt-click on the rotation of our first ease null and paste that, and then that's going to add. This is all going to like everything that's happening here from the zoom out, the text coming in from the side, the Sapphire Shake, and the exposure are all playing into each other. So they're all kind of helping each other out to create more of like a dynamic movement really easily. So we turn on motion blur. Let's take a look at what we've got. If you want to ramp preview, there you go. So the wobble is very, very subtle, but I like it. So the Sapphire Shake makes the screen, the way I like to look at it is the Sapphire Shake makes the screen look like it's being shook up, and it's also making it look like that rotation is the reason, like the reason why the rotation is happening is because of that Sapphire Shake. And then it kind of like the wobble, or the bounce of the rotation from the null kind of like makes it seem like the Sapphire Shake is still happening, and it kind of like left an aftermath on the text almost, if that makes sense. Like the Sapphire Shake happens, it shakes up the screen, and from that Sapphire Shake, the text, the reason why it's wobbling is because of that shake, if that makes sense. See, the shake happens and the text kind of wobbles from it. And that's how I get that effect. And if you watch Animate Typography, you'll see it a lot, like this little effect here. And in this example, it wobbles a little more. But yeah, that's what I use a lot. And I'll use this on beats and stuff, or if there's like, usually in music, this is where I'll use this. I find it most helpful there. But yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. That's it for this little video. So this is the beginners Kinetic Typography in After Effects. I hope you guys enjoyed, learned a little something about typography. I think typography is really fun, so I would suggest looking more into it. Find other tutorials, practice, do a lot of practice with this. You can use it to your advantage. It's a very, very nice thing to know how to do. So that's it. I will see you guys in the next tutorial. Bye.